They say the hardest part of climbing the corporate ladder isn't the work you put in, it's the walls built to keep you out. For James Carter, those walls weren't made of brick or steel. They were made of prejudice. He had given 10 years of his life to Westbrook Industries. 10 years of late nights, weekends sacrificed, and milestones missed with his wife and daughter. He built the systems that made his department run like a well-oiled machine. When things went wrong, James was the one everyone turned to. So when the position for Vice President of Operations finally opened, everyone assumed James would get it. He had earned it in every measurable way. The staff whispered it in the break room, and his colleagues sent him encouraging texts. Even James believed for the first time in years that all his hard work was about to pay off. But then came the meeting. James stood before his boss, Richard Thornton, a man who wore arrogance like a suit and carried entitlement like a birthright. Richard leaned back in his leather chair, arms crossed, a smug smile tugging at his lips. "James," he began, flipping through James's application with deliberate slowness. "Your work here is adequate." Adequate, the word hit like a slap. "But," Richard continued, "this company needs someone who can represent us. Someone who looks the part, talks the part, fits the image of a leader. You understand, don't you?" James's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what Richard meant. His resume was flawless. His record was spotless. The only thing James didn't have was Richard's skin color. "So," Richard said, closing the folder with a smug snap, "I've decided to give the promotion to Bradley. He's young, dynamic, and, well, clients will feel more comfortable with him as the face of Westbrook." Bradley, a man with 2 years at the company who spent more time networking at golf clubs than actually working. James felt the air drain from his chest. 10 years erased in an instant. But he didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply nodded, gathered his things, and left the office. Because deep down, James knew something Richard didn't. This wasn't the end of the story. That evening, James got a call that would change everything. It wasn't from HR, it wasn't from a colleague, it was from the board of directors. "Mr. Carter," the voice on the phone said, "we'd like to discuss an opportunity with you confidentially." James's brows furrowed. He agreed to the meeting, and what he learned that night would flip Richard's entire world upside down. The boardroom was colder than usual the next morning, but James walked in with a quiet confidence. Richard was already there, bragging loudly to Bradley about his vision for the company. When the directors entered, Richard straightened his tie, ready to bask in their approval. But then the chairman cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, before we begin, I'd like to announce a change in leadership." Richard smirked, assuming this was his moment. But the chairman's next words drained the color from his face. "Effective immediately, James Carter will be assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer." The room went silent. Bradley's jaw dropped. Richard's pen slipped from his hand. James rose slowly from his chair, every eye in the room fixed on him. His voice was calm, steady, but filled with the power of 10 years of silence breaking. "Richard, you told me I wasn't the right face for leadership," James said evenly. "But the board seems to disagree. They've seen my work, they've seen my dedication, and they know what true leadership looks like." Richard stammered, "This is impossible. I built this company." "No," James cut in sharply. "You built barriers, you built walls to keep people like me down, but walls can't stand forever. And today, they've come crashing down." The irony was thick. The man who had denied James a promotion hours earlier was now staring at his new boss. From that day, the office felt different. Employees who had been overlooked, underestimated, and silenced finally felt seen. James walked the halls, not just as their CEO, but as their proof that justice could exist in a place that had long ignored it. But Richard wasn't done. As James settled into his new office, the one Richard once thought would always be his, an envelope slid under the door. No name, no sender, just one line typed across the page. "You may be CEO now, but you won't survive what's coming." James froze, the weight of the words sinking in. This wasn't just office politics anymore. Someone was coming after him, and the power shift that had just begun was about to ignite a war. James had broken through the walls that prejudice built, but now new enemies were already moving against him. The question wasn't whether he could lead the company. The question was whether he could survive it. If you're really enjoying this story, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you don't miss my latest uploads. Now, let's dive back into the story. James Carter had barely adjusted to the leather chair of his new office when he found the threat waiting for him. You may be CEO now, but you won't survive what's coming. He folded the letter slowly, his jaw tightening. It wasn't just Richard's bruised ego anymore. Someone wanted to destroy him. That morning's board meeting confirmed it. Whispers traveled like wildfire. Rumors of financial discrepancies, missing files, and contracts suddenly disappearing. Documents James had personally secured just days ago were now gone. And all trails pointed back to one man, Richard Thornton, the same boss who had denied James a promotion. The same man who scoffed at his image was now plotting to frame him and prove to the board that appointing him CEO was a mistake. Richard thought he had the upper hand. He'd worked with the board for years. He knew their weaknesses, their habits, and he was certain James, new to the CEO seat, would crumble under pressure. But Richard underestimated one thing. James hadn't survived 10 years of prejudice, late nights, and being overlooked by accident. He knew how to play the long game. Later that week, Richard stormed into a board meeting, throwing down a stack of evidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced dramatically, "our new CEO has been mishandling funds. Look here, signatures missing, expenses unaccounted for. This company is bleeding under his leadership." Gasps rippled across the table. Board members exchanged worried glances. For a moment, Richard's plan seemed to be working, but James remained calm. He leaned back in his chair, eyes steady, voice even. "Interesting, Richard, very interesting, but before the board makes any judgments, perhaps they should see this." James pulled out a USB drive and handed it to the chairman. "Everything you've presented," James said, "is fabricated, and I have proof." The lights dimmed as the chairman connected the drive to the projector. On the screen appeared security footage. Clear as day, it showed Richard sneaking into the records office at midnight, removing files and doctoring documents. The board gasped. And then came the audio, Richard's voice caught on a recording. "If Carter thinks he's staying CEO, he's dead wrong. I'll bury him before I ever take orders from him." The silence in the room was electric. James stood, his voice ringing with controlled power. "Richard, you tried to bury me with lies. You underestimated me because you thought power meant control. But true power comes from truth." Richard's face was drained of color. He stammered, This is out of context, you can't." But the chairman cut him off, his voice firm. "Richard Thornton, effective immediately. You are terminated from Westbrook Industries. Security will escort you out." The irony was crushing. The man who once believed James wasn't fit for leadership was now being dragged out of the very company he thought he owned. The employees who once bowed to Richard's arrogance now watched as he was stripped of everything. Some smirked, others applauded quietly. Justice wasn't just served, it was witnessed. Later that night, James sat in his office, the city skyline glowing behind him. His phone buzzed with messages of congratulations, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of every late night, every missed birthday with his daughter, every time he'd been told he wasn't the right fit. He thought of how close Richard had come to destroying not just his career, but his dignity. And yet through it all, he had stayed steady. He had let the truth speak louder than lies. He knew this wasn't the last battle. Power attracted enemies. But for the first time, James felt the weight of true authority, not as something handed to him, but as something earned. And as he looked out at the city, he whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning." Life lesson. When arrogance builds walls, truth will tear them down. Real leadership isn't about image, it's about integrity. And integrity will always outlast hate. Now let me ask you this. If you were in James's shoes, would you have exposed Richard right away or waited for him to trap himself? Leave your answer in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories just like this one.